We did an event similar to this in Adelaide last week, which was very successful. I'm very much looking forward to today, as I hope you are. My name is Simon Wilkins. I'm the General Manager for LexisNexis Australia, and I'll be your facilitator here today for our panel and group discussion on human v cloud, computing the people factor of legal services. This is the third time, or the third year, that we've ran an event of this kind of style, and a series that we hope will facilitate, good discussion in the legal community. The first year we did this a couple of years ago. We looked at innovation inertia and the risk appetite for innovation in the legal landscape. And this led to a discussion last year on smart law, which looked directly at the impact of technology on the practice of law. And it's led to this kind of natural progression of focusing on people this year and how the profession is being impacted. I hope you enjoy our discussion as much today as we have in previous years. Let me first start by introducing our panellists, and I'm very appreciative again of our panellists taking the time to come and spend some time with us today. First, on my left here I have Dr. Richard Chambers, who's a clinical psychologist and mindfulness consultant who supports businesses, educational institutions, sporting and community organisations to use mindfulness to enhance well-being and productivity. He's actively involved in mindfulness research at a number of leading universities across Australia, has published a number of peer-reviewed journal articles, and is the author of The Art of Mindful Origami and co-author of Mindful Learning. He's helped to develop a free app called Smiling Mind, which has 1.4 million downloads. I downloaded it this afternoon, Richard. And it supports the idea of mindfulness meditation and the idea that that should be accessible and practiced, maybe practiced by all. So, welcome, Richard. Next in line there we have Cade Fazio. Cade is the Manager of Digital Innovation Strategies at Justice Connect. And Cade is committed to social justice and access to high-quality legal assistance and leads the development of digital innovation that uses technology to deliver access to justice. She's the lead on Justice Connect's Legal Help Gateway project, which has been funded by Google, and is formerly a solicitor for King & Wood Mallesons. And Cade has wide experience as a legal advisor and board member within the Australian social enterprise and not-for-profit sector. She's also the Vice President of YWCA Australia, a women-led organisation that provides advocacy, programs and services for women, families and the communities. Welcome, Cade. Then we have, next in line, Emily McCarthy. Emily is a Principal and Head of Talent at Lexvoco. Having worked for almost a decade in the legal industry, Emily was admitted as a solicitor to the Supreme Court of Victoria last year, and she specialises in talent management, advising lawyers of all experience levels on career progression and development. She's an expert at matching and coordinating lawyers, including teams of lawyers, with legal projects to achieve the best results for clients, aligning not only the technical skills required, but also cultural fit. Welcome, Emily. And last but by no means least, we have Anne-Marie Cade, who is the Principal of Daniel Lew LeMercier Legal & Co. and the founder of Divorce Right. After practicing law in Sri Lanka for over a decade, Anne-Marie moved to Melbourne and started the legal practice of LeMercier Legal and Conveyancing in her living room as she wanted to work around her family. After experiencing much success, Anne-Marie took over the practice of Daniel Lew & Co. lawyers to expand her practice via a virtual law firm. And she further expanded by founding the online legal platform Divorce Right that uses interactive web technology in a way that keeps costs low and affordable. And Anne-Marie considers herself a legalpreneur as she aims to demystify legal services for clients by incorporating the latest advances in technology to make legal services more accessible to clients who were previously unable to get help for the legal issues that they have. Please join me in welcoming the panel. All right. Okay, so I'm going to do a short introduction to a few of the things that we're going to discuss, but just wanted to make sure you knew what my job was. I see my job as an airline pilot really in this whole experience, so I just want to make sure the journey is an enjoyable one and we land this baby on time. If we do that, we're in good shape. So, let's start by thinking, a little bit about why we're here today. Everyone here, whether they're in-house counsel, a legal practitioner at a law firm, a practice manager, or even LexisNexis staff, we're facing challenges that come with the evolving expectations of legal service delivery today. We live in an era where technology is shaking up traditional roles, disrupting business models, and propagating what we could always call an always-on mindset. And the legal profession is right at the vanguard of these changes. Technology continues to create new opportunities for business growth, as well as new ways to access the legal system that didn't exist before, making it a truly exciting time to be a legal professional. A study that we ran last year on legal and regulatory technology found that 1 in 5 legal service firms had allocated more than 40% of their IT budgets to workflow efficiency and productivity technology. Another key theme that transpired from the survey is the growing trend towards mobility, driven by mobile device ownership, and how the daily commute can now be an extension of the office. And indeed, a quarter of our respondents said that the time in the daily commute is used to conduct work-related activities such as reading emails and managing calendars. And technology has also impacted the face of the legal landscape by providing new avenues of flexibility and mobility. And it's also added a sense of constant connectedness that adds to the mental health concerns of an already possibly ailing profession. So this year's survey focused on the Australian legal profession, and the results will be released in conjunction with this event series, and we'll send that detail to you all. So we've invited everybody here today to put people at the core of the discussion and explore how the pressure to embrace technology has impacted the practice, purpose and passion of the legal profession. We've got some fairly thought-provoking points I think we're going to look at with our panel of leading experts and innovators from the legal and business sectors. So, let's go. And first we're going to start by telling you a little bit about live polling. So, what we're going to do throughout the session today is ask for your participation and your contribution via live polling. So, and we'd like you all to participate. You don't have to, but if you'd like to, please get your mobile phones or laptops or mobile devices ready. And what we need you to do is just enter the web address on the screen into your web browser on your device. So that's poll, P-O-L-L.ev/, I think that's a forward slash, right? I was getting this wrong way. Lexis AUS, Lexis Oz. Don't log in, you don't need to log in. Simply respond to the question when it's going to come on your phone. And we'll turn to this a little bit later on. And if you need a Wi-Fi code for the venue, we've got people here, I think, that can also help you with that, but by all means connect to the Wi-Fi. All right, if anybody's having a problem at any point throughout that, stick your hand up. We've got a bunch of technical experts that know exactly how to do this, that can help you. Okay, and today we want our discussion to be as robust as possible, with lots of discussion and ideas. As I say, we'd like to encourage you to participate. So if you have a question, for me, hopefully not, but for members of the panel, please raise your hand and we'll make sure that we get the microphone to you so you can ask that question. And from a social media perspective, if you're using Twitter tonight, you can engage or follow the conversation using hashtag HVC17, which you'll also see at the bottom of the slide now. Okay, all right, so let's go. And I'd like to kick off the discussion with a general but very important question. And Cade, I'd like to start with you. And this is really just a very general and soft opening, I hope. So please tell us what attracted you to a career of law in the first place, and what do you find fulfilling in your career?
In terms of attraction, I'm a cliche, so I've got a really bad answer to that one. My parents were both lawyers, as were my grandparents. Even my grandma was a lawyer, and my great-grandfather was a lawyer, so I was a 4th generation lawyer in our family. I did a media degree as well, so I was thinking maybe I'd be an investigative journalist or something really cool like that. I then realised that it's actually really hard to be a journalist, and so then it seemed like law was probably the easier option at the time. And then I encountered what I and some of my friends have termed the funnel, where if you do quite well at law school and you get some seasonal clerkships that you do reasonably well at, you end up at a corporate law firm. So I was funnelled into King & Wood Mallisons, which I shouldn't say was too bad because it actually provided me with some really good training, but a few years into that time I realised that that wasn't really where I wanted to be, and somehow 5 years had flashed by and I'd ended up as a corporate lawyer and it wasn't really resonating with me. I'd done a lot of pro bono work in my time at King & Wood Mallisons, and when a job came up at Justice Connect, that was one of the places where I'd done a lot of my pro bono work through. I jumped at the opportunity and I moved over to Justice Connect, and that was about 5 years ago, and I've been there ever since. So I find working in the access to justice space to be extremely fulfilling. Justice Connect is a really interesting organisation. It's full of corporate refugees, so it's a really good environment. I find it's kind of a hybrid environment. It's full of people who are quite determined, lawyerish types, but working towards that access to justice aim. So I think I've found my people.
Thanks, Cade. Anne-Marie, what attracted you to this space?
When I finished high school, there were probably 3 options. It was science, arts, or law. So I was no good at science or maths. So I decided, okay, let me do law. And I guess it also gave me a degree of independence and flexibility to probably do my own thing. And so I went on and did a law degree. Moved to Australia, had a little, very young family, so decided I'll start my own practice at home with wills and conveyancing. And then did okay with that, and then decided to probably take it online, and I found clients quite receptive of that. And then in the course of the work I was doing, I would constantly find clients complaining about how disgruntled they were with the family law system and how things worked in that space, and I kind of wanted to make a difference. So I went off and did a mediation course, and then decided I would be a family dispute resolution practitioner, and started this platform where I say I work with clients to empower them to reach a peaceful, amicable solution and stay out of the family court. And so that's what I do, and I find it very fulfilling because I really feel I can make a change in the way people separate, and I tell them that divorce can really, be something positive and something they can look back on with pride. So if you don't go down the path of litigating, there is an option, and I want to try and steer people away from the adversarial system to mediation and negotiations.
Thanks, Anne-Marie.
Thank you.
Emily, what do you think motivates legal professionals nowadays?
I think it's the same that it always has been. I think people often come to law because it's absolutely the kind of environment where you are mentally stimulated constantly, and I think it attracts a certain type of person in the first place because of that, and that's what keeps people engaged. And I think at the end of the day, whether you're an in-house counsel, or you're a private sole practitioner, or you're working in access to justice, it's about helping your clients, and that can be done obviously in such a range of different ways, whether it's litigation and what Anne-Marie talks about, really hits home in terms of that would be so rewarding to help people going through a really difficult time. But that's not to say that that's any different or better than the reward that someone working as a corporate M&A lawyer might get from completing a transaction. So I think it's the same these days as it always has been. It's a great mental challenge, and it's about helping your clients do what they want to do.
Okay, thank you. And I think the variety of roles that you guys encompass here on the stage is quite an interesting one. It talks about different kind of trajectories that there are now in legal careers. And I don't know that the trajectory is quite as linear as it may have been in the past, maybe, or as it seemed to be. So we're going to ask our first poll question on that basis, and hopefully the question is up there. It certainly is. So what we just need you to do is just decide, based on hopefully what you're seeing on your device there, what is the following, which of the following is the best indicator do you believe, for a successful legal career? And whilst we're doing that, maybe I'll just ask you a question, Richard. How are you seeing definitions of success change in the broader kind of business landscape?
Well, there's certainly a much greater recognition of mental health in a good career, and also fulfilment and living in line with your values. I think certainly compared to my parents' generation, it's less of a, I think it's less of a well-defined track. And what we see as success is, of course, much broader. I think Gen Y would be a really good example of the pointy end of that. Really wanting some fulfilment and some to have a career that really sort of meets their own personal values. But people are becoming less and less happy, and then it's not enough these days just to have a successful career and tick sort of the superficial boxes. I think that people sort of are really starting to notice the cost of doing that.
Yeah.
So the definition of success, I think, must include happiness, must include fulfilment, and living in accordance with values, and of course, and a good mental health as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and certainly these are preoccupations. I think broader business has, industries have. We certainly have that consideration throughout LexisNexis, for example. And it's interesting when we look on the screen there that, and you guys can't see this, which is a shame, so you're gonna have to do that. But you can see there that 53% of our respondees now are saying that an indication of a successful career is in that personal satisfaction space, which again I think talks absolutely to what you're saying there, Richard, around being happy or finding something else, rather than whether it's income or whether it might be career progression in terms of defining what success means. And maybe Emily, this is a question for you again. How are organisations now looking at how they attract talent with these kind of considerations in mind?
Yeah, that's something that I obviously deal with and look at every day, and it's something that I have noticed in the past 5 years particularly. There's been a lot of research put out about that and a lot of change. There's there are studies that come up all the time saying money used to always be the number one factor when people were looking at their jobs and their careers. It's really have shift towards satisfaction and work-life balance, and it's a term that gets thrown around all the time. What does it really mean? But there certainly is a real push, I think, towards people being able to have a job that they like, that fits in with the lifestyle that's more important to them. And obviously, you want to get compensated for that, but it's certainly been a real shift that I've noticed towards work-life balance, personal satisfaction, the things that Richard talked about. That's been the driver, and I've certainly seen from an employer perspective, that's where employers are heading, and they know that that's what they will need to do if they want to retain and engage staff for the length of their career. You can push people for a few years working really hard and pay them really well, but it's not going to be the longevity of a career that you want, I think. And that's certainly something that I see every day when I meet and talk to lawyers who come and talk to our organisation. They come and talk to Lexvoco because it offers a different path than a traditional legal path. And every day I talk to people saying, I want to have a job or a career that's engaging and fits in with the lifestyle that I want to have. They don't come to me saying, I want to get paid a lot and I want to work a lot.
Do they, out of interest, do they come to you and say, I want to work for this company or that company? Do they specify along those lines?
No, not to me
Okay.
about that. I don't know if they go to, I'm sure they target other companies for that reason, but for me it's they want to work for interesting clients, and, good clients, but it's and more often than not it's sectors that they want to work in, but I don't hear about particular companies as much.
Okay. Cade, question for you. So, how are you seeing things change in this space? And when we think about access to justice and the passion that obviously brings about in people in the legal profession. Do you see that kind of alignment of those passions and career being a really important part of things in terms of that indication of success or a successful career?
Yeah, well, I think obviously at an organisation like Justice Connect, that it's very important to people who are working at Justice Connect, and you really feel that at an organisation like Justice Connect. But in the section more broadly, we are seeing that lawyers are doing more and more pro bono, and Justice Connect, as one of the things that we do at Justice Connect is we broker pro bono, and we are seeing an increasing demand from law firms to do more pro bono. And so one of the projects that I'm working on is to build a digital tool to help us more quickly match people with pro bono lawyers, because we're actually struggling to meet the demand of lawyers to do more pro bono. And so I think that shows that there is, within the legal profession, increasing desire to do pro bono work, and I think that is partly being driven by this desire to balance out the work style in a corporate law firm. We recently ran a survey at Justice Connect, and we asked people about what are the motivations for doing pro bono work, and it really was this question of, I want what I do day to day to have an impact. That was really what resonated amongst all the answers that we got back. So that's not to say that lawyers don't see the work they do for their commercial clients as having an impact, but they do want to have some connection to their communities, some connection to vulnerable people, as well as to their commercial clients through their legal practice. They want to be able to take those professional skills. That was something they particularly said, was I want to use the professional skills that I've built up throughout my career to assist people and to assist my community. So I think that's driving this increasing desire to do pro bono.
Interesting. And again, you know, people reflect on this in some ways. I remember hearing from a colleague of mine that after reaching a certain stage in his career, he was talking about being significant rather than being successful.
That's right.
Interesting.
That's right. It's that sense of connection and having that impact.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, out of interest, in our recent survey where we asked this question, slightly different to what we see here on screen, but I mean, I think similar sense or ideas. The most selected indicator was peer recognition as an expert, which was followed by attaining professional standing and positive work-life balance, but certainly that work-life balance piece again coming through really strongly. Let's move on to the next question. So, with the change in legal careers, there's definitely been a change in habits, right, in the way that we all work. And we've seen this increase of work outside of office hours. And there's an expectation, I'm certain everybody is feeling it, that you are always available, either from your clients or from your colleagues. And in France, interestingly enough, there's been recent legislation calling for the right to disconnect. Some large German organisations have now put bans in place to ensure employees aren't checking and responding to emails 24/7. I know that since I've been here, I've probably got 6 to 10 emails from my boss asking me what I'm up to. But you know, this idea of connectedness is kind of interesting. And so our next question here is: which of the following practices do you believe best stimulate work-life balance in the legal profession? But first, Richard, I'm going to ask about this right to disconnect. I mean, do you think we need something like that in Australia?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, your facts are almost correct, but Germany, I think, was the first country to pass that legislation. It's now labour law in Germany that it's illegal to email employees outside of office hours for anything that's non-emergency. So I guess that's a nice, flexible kind of definition, isn't it? But, and Volkswagen was actually one of the first companies to experiment with that. They started turning off their BlackBerry servers overnight so that their employees couldn't communicate out of office hours, and actually found that their productivity improved.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, I guess their employees would go home, they disconnect from the grid, they hang out with the family, they get a good night's sleep, get that work-life balance in check, they come back to the office in the morning happy and refreshed and get through more work in the time they were there than if they were answering emails at 2 o'clock in the morning. So you've got this nice business case. I mean, Volkswagen has its own problems, of course, these days, but not related to this, right? And so you've got this nice business case, and we're seeing more of that. A lot of companies are starting to recognise, hey, maybe there's something in that. Do a lot of work in youth mental health as well, and young people have their phones buzzing away under their pillows all night long, Facebook and Instagram, and I'm sure even people in the room here might have their phone kind of buzzing with those emails and those text messages coming in. And if you start to actually really pay attention to that, you notice that productivity actually takes a hit. It's actually it's anti-productive and it's counterproductive, sorry, and it's also and it's really not good for mental health, impairs sleep and that kind of thing. So I think that seeing these positive examples in the business world, seeing growing numbers of people just making that recognition themselves is good. And yes, I think that some kind of legislation might actually be pretty helpful, because despite everything I've just said, we live in a society that prizes this idea of multitasking and connectivity as if that's what we need to be doing to be productive and happy and live a good life. But the research certainly said it's not true.
Yeah, people wear it like a badge to a certain extent, don't they?
Definitely.
Yeah. And again, I'm just interested, is it kind of fear of missing out that drives things to a certain extent? Is it control? Is it just fear of, you know, not being as responsive as, I mean, what are the psychological drivers that
all of the above.
Okay.
Certainly that fear of missing out is a big one.
Yeah.
And that fear of not being available, of missing that time critical email, of course, is really a huge driver. But we're also practicing being reactive. Anything we practice, we get better at. And so in most modern societies, we're practicing being reactive and distracted, and that then becomes just a habit for us and then spreads out and becomes a sort of a cultural norm. And then a very interesting thing happens. A lot of law firms that I work with start to change it. Once I take them through, training around it, they start to actually notice experientially the cost of trying to multitask, the cost of checking emails at 2 o'clock in the morning. People start to naturally just make changes themselves. And some really interesting stuff starts to happen. They really start to notice big improvements in productivity and levels of happiness.
Okay. Thanks. I'm going to email my boss and tell him that's what we should do. You should be reading it.
Excuse me, Richard.
Yes.
If you're intelligent enough to get a law degree, wouldn't you be intelligent enough to turn off the phone and get a good night's sleep?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? You really would think so. But right now, there are teams of engineers at Google and Facebook who are working around the clock to keep you on your phone. So we're working against that.
Self-discipline in people.
Look, it is a lack of self-discipline in a way, but it's also just not recognising the cost, because we live in this, like I said before, we live in this society that really prizes this idea of multitasking and connectivity, and if we don't actually pay attention, we just get caught up in that, and a lot of people, particularly I think younger generations, just get completely caught up in that. And I mean, kids at school these days, they have no idea what I'm talking about, I'm saying this, I can multitask, and that's fine, checking my, I don't mind, being on my phone all that long, it's not a problem, but paying attention, I think we start to notice that it is.
Anne-Marie, thank you, Richard, and thank you for the question. Anne-Marie, so you started Le Mercier in the comfort of your home for that kind of flexible working arrangements, and seeing some of the responses here, this kind of stimulation of work-life balance, the number one response there seems to be supportive management culture and this mobility piece. But I mean, how do you see this kind of space changing? Is there anything here that's kind of surprising to you, do you think?
No, I have to say I can't see that very well, but having said that, coming back to the work-life balance, again, I actually sort of grapple with the idea of work-life balance because I kind of have a different take on it. I sort of look at things a bit differently, and I think it's a case of integrating what you love into what you do. And sort of, you really can't compartmentalize things, There are situations or times where you probably get an email at 8 o'clock at night that you really need to respond to. But I guess in the big organizations, it's probably moving away from the billable hour to, focus on time, to probably focus on outcomes. So if they do something like that, I think, then there'd be a more balance. But when it comes to work-life balance, it's difficult, sort of talking about that because lives are dynamic and ever-changing, and sometimes you can't compartmentalize it. It just depends on the situation, and I remember when I had my little daughter, I thought, okay, let me take Wednesday off and I'll get someone else to work on the Wednesday. And if I got an email on the Wednesday, I'd go into a panic, But I would think that, if I didn't really have those rigid rules in place and I was more flexible, I was more comfortable working around what I was doing. So I think it's just different for everybody, but you know, with the big corporates, they have to just recognize that people need to switch off at some point. And I think if the focus is more on the outcome rather than how many hours you've done, that would probably be a good starting point.
Thanks, Emily. And Emily, you've already talked about work-life balance to a certain extent, but what are the practices? I mean, again, we talk about supportive management culture here. What are the practices, or what are the what are the ideas that are now coming through, do you think, that support this work-life balance, but whilst, you're still totally engaged and, and ensuring that you're delivering those outcomes that Anne-Marie talks to?
I think that's the first part, is that if there was a solution to this, then we wouldn't be sitting here talking about it. It's something that we've now talked about however many years. So there's no one clear-cut solution. I think that Anne-Marie's suggestion is the right one. If you can move towards an outcomes-focused solution, then that's the right direction. Because I think I agree with you. I like to kind of think about it in my head as embracing flexibility. So for me, that means, and I'm very fortunate to work in an organisation where this is 100% the norm, but I work when it suits me. So it's a bit of a joke that I don't work on Friday afternoons. I'm in the office, but my brain is not there. So I'm much more likely to accept that I'm not going to get much done on a Friday afternoon and move that and do it on Monday, when I can be 100% there and focused on what it is that I need to achieve. So I think it's absolutely about embracing flexibility and making it work for you, and I think that that's what you're saying, Anne-Marie. And absolutely, and I think we're going to get onto this later, but using technology to your advantage. So using your phone when you're on the train to respond to something, instead of looking at it, stressing about it, waiting till the next day when you're supposed to be back in the office, thinking about that email all night instead of just responding at the time. Using technology absolutely to your advantage where you can, and there's so many different ways that you can, which I think we'll probably get onto in a little bit.
Okay, thank you. When we surveyed out to our customers here, we saw that the most preferred practice was the support for remote working. That's really what work-life balance was often about. But many respondents talked about just this idea of just turning off, just being able to turn things off. And again, that need for a supportive culture and management structure actually wasn't something we had in the original poll, but our respondees said that's what it's all about. So we put that there, and you guys have told us that's actually where it really lands. So that's very interesting. So moving on, now let's talk a bit about technology. And there is definitely, this is totally in the public consciousness right now when we talk about the legal space and technology. I mean, there was I think it was called the AI Wars or something, was the iView ABC doco that people may have seen last week. You open the Daily Telegraph or newspapers, there's something about legal technology, and it was seen on every single page. I was interested. There was a survey somebody sent to me recently from a company called Pega Systems, P-E-G-A Systems, which is actually a customer experience organization. They surveyed 6,000 adults in North America, EMEA, and APAC, and just asked them about AI, asked them about artificial intelligence. Interestingly enough, 72% of respondees said, yes, I absolutely do understand everything about artificial intelligence. And then when they were asked, what does that mean? They said 31% of the respondees said, we're going to replace human jobs with robots. 24% said there's going to be robots enslaving us, and 10% said AI will take over the world. So, not sure they necessarily got it, though, although it is quite interesting, and again, we talk about this a lot in the office, that AI is going to become like electricity. You're not going to say, I have my light powered by, they used to say I have an electric powered light. You don't, you just have a light. Right? So AI is going to be that pervasive, I think, and technology is going to be that pervasive in our culture. So when we think about this, and this idea that the robots are coming, which may have created some kind of level of uncertainty, you know, there's this focus on artificial intelligence, bots, automation, emerging technologies. Is this just a kind of, you know, attention-grabbing headline? Is it all totally overhyped? So we have a word cloud here. Again, just pick. I think you can do this, right? Pick a word. You can thanks, Paulina. Just pick a word and tell me what's really changing the legal profession. And sorry, you guys can't see this. We should have figured that out. We're going to do that next time around. Anyway, Cade, do you think this focus on, you know, futurism or, you know, I don't know whether it's science fiction, do you think that's really detracting from the realities of how technology is really impacting, you know, our jobs? Are we focusing on the advantages of technology in the first place, do you think, or are we just fearful?
I certainly think that there's a fair bit of hype, and I've gone and I try to try out the products that go in the news, that appear in the news, and some of them are pretty bad. But some of them are really exciting, and from my perspective, despite the hype, I actually do think that there are a lot of really important developments right on the horizon, and for me, working in the access to justice space, I think that that's really exciting, because for us it's not just about competing in the marketplace or trying to do things more efficiently for our clients. It's actually about having finite resources and having 8.5 million Australians in Australia, 8.5 million Australians with a legal problem, and half of them not being able to access a lawyer, and us having very few financial resources to fund legal services. So with that limited pool of funding, what is it that we can do to provide legal assistance to the millions of Australians who don't have that assistance? Well, technology is a clear answer for us. And I think that increasingly we're going to be able to use these tools to provide resources that come pretty close to the one-on-one assistance that we would ideally like to provide to people that can't afford a lawyer. So I don't think we have the answer right now, but I do think that it is coming increasingly close. So there's lots of chatbots that are out there. I've tried most of them, and I don't think that any of them are particularly awesome, but they're getting a lot closer. So natural language processing is one of the really interesting areas of development at the moment. And you know, IBM Watson is one of the really interesting ones. It's very hard to just have an AI that you can just ask for legal advice for any problem under the sun at the moment. That doesn't really exist, but there are tools that are being created for discrete areas of law that are getting better and better. But I don't think we're very far off having natural language processing that will apply to a really diverse range of legal problems that will be very useful in an access to justice setting. So to me, that's really exciting, and acknowledging there is hype, I still think that that's a really important development for the access to justice space.
Thanks, Cade. Anne-Marie, what are your thoughts about this space and technology in the lives of legal professionals?
With regards to technology, I think it's important to leverage technology to increase efficiencies. So you do that with, you know, document automation, and that, you know, would increase productivity. So as a result of that, you would think that, you know, legal services would make legal services more accessible to clients, because most people actually come to see a lawyer having Googled most of the answers anyway. And so they come to see you, you know, with quite a lot of information. And they're coming to see you for further clarification. So that is the advantage of technology. And it used to be, or it still is, I would say, that, you know, when people think of seeing a lawyer, whether it's in a family law situation or, you know, probably a personal dispute, there's a sense of apprehension, you know, oh my goodness, I've got to see a lawyer. And I think technology somehow breaks down some of those barriers. It makes them more accessible. I find that with my platform anyway. And especially in the family law space, they may come to see me and, you know, they're pretty rattled, they don't know what to do, they have the conversation, and, you know, they may go off, but with technology I find I can continue that conversation with them. And not feel like I'm harassing them and calling them, and, you know, but I can in subtle ways really continue that conversation with them. And so I think that technology actually is a great enabler, and we should be using it to our advantage.
And do you think that clients bring their kind of consumer experience of technology into your space, into the kind of legal space? They just anticipate, because they see technology so pervasively in their consumer-oriented.
Yes, and also in my platform, I've got an online questionnaire where they can, instead of coming and seeing a lawyer, one of the lawyers on my panel, and giving them their whole life story, and they're pretty rattled, they may leave information out. I've got an interactive form on the website, so they can sit and put that information in, save it, and go back to it maybe later, and over a period of time, put all that information in, and they're not being billed for that. So that is, they feel more comfortable doing something like that, because then they send that on to the lawyer, and then come and see the lawyer having sent that information. And those are some of the advantages that I find with technology.
And when we think about then how organisations, embrace technology and automation, I think there's also got to be this element of human touch, right, in that space as well. And this personal touch, this customised approach for clients is.
What I find is that because you've got the computer doing the boring stuff, and your time's not consumed doing that, you've got so much more time to actually sit and interact with the client and spend that time with the client, really understanding what it is their problem is and what it is that they're trying to achieve. So that is, I think, very important. And whatever happens with technology, I don't think we're going to be replaced by robots in the future. Because that human element is so important when it comes to law and legal services, especially in particular areas like family law, and even when clients are buying a property, they have 101 questions, and they really want to be reassured along the way, and no computer's going to do that. So you just have to match up technology with the human aspect, and that's perfect balance. Just strike that balance.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, Emily, your thoughts on that in terms of that balance? And again, I'm interested particularly as we've seen, your space thinking a lot about technology.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's striking a balance and not getting left behind. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is, I think where the problem often lies is that people look to technology, whatever the technology is, it's a piece of software or whatever it is, they look to that to solve their whole problem, but that's not the right way of looking at it. You've got to work out, firstly, we always say, what's the problem, what's the process that you're looking at, and is that flawed? Is there something wrong with that process? Because no piece of technology is going to solve your whole problem, and it's certainly the case when you're looking at interacting with clients, or in my case, often with lawyers who just want to get in touch with us. It's absolutely using that right balance of personal touch and the right kind of technology to meet your needs and to fit in with your process or your system, whatever it is. And so I think it will be really interesting to see what happens in the next 5 years in that space, because there's absolutely going to be more bots every day, and I'll laugh to see, the day that a top tier firm has a chatbot on there.
Yeah, I think it's coming.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see it, but I think that's coming. But it would be really interesting to see how we progress in the next 5 years, and I think the people or the organisations who will succeed are the ones who will get that balance right.
And we actually did a lot of user research at Justice Connect with vulnerable clients, because there is a perception that vulnerable people don't want to engage online. And so we did a really big piece of research at Justice Connect to test that assumption. And we found out that, in fact, they do want to engage online. There's really large proportions of the marginalised and vulnerable people that we engage with who do want to interact with their smartphones or in a public library, for all the reasons that you described, that they get stressed when they're talking to someone on the phone, that they want to be in peace and quiet, filling in a form by themselves. They don't like clunky forms. No one does. No one likes providing unnecessary information in really long, horrible, ugly forms. They like guided, nice forms, just like everyone else does. but they do actually like to engage online, and they understand, just like everyone else does, that there are significant efficiencies to be gained by doing that first information transfer in an online setting, so that then when you have a conversation, whether that's over the phone or face-to-face, everyone has shared that information so that you're having an informed conversation rather than spending all that time spelling your name out, saying your date of birth. So it really confirms to us at Justice Connect that moving things into an online setting is really supported by evidence, even with marginalised and vulnerable people.
That's really interesting. And again, I think just this awareness of technology in the space, which is just exploding. And then just a final question for you, Emily, on that. Do you finding just this understanding of technology is exploding? You know, when you're talking to lawyers, they're just so much now more cognizant of what's happening in the space, or is it just again, you know, we're all catching up? Are we reinventing ourselves on a daily basis?
I think so. Certainly the kind of lawyers that I want to work with are the ones who are interested in using technology to their advantage. So I think that if you're burying your head in the sand about this, then that's fine. But you're going to be left behind. And it's something that, you know, I've had to get my head around too, I've started to change the way that I think about things. And we were just talking about this before the panel began on, you know, design thinking, and that's something that's so difficult for all of us who've been through law school to get your head around when everything's linear, to suddenly change that pathway and start having to think about things in a different way. That's challenging, but if anyone's, I personally think if anyone's up for the challenge, it's smart, hard-working people like lawyers should be.
Right, thank you. And Richard, final part of this question. So what are your thoughts on this? Because, you know, can individuals be more mindful of the benefits of technology, automation, all those kind of things, but still keep, you know, connected at a human level? What are the secrets to making sure that works?
Yeah, I really agree with most of what's been said. I think that digital technology can be a really very powerful tool, but I think we need to just see it as a tool. Mm-hmm. As we sort of touched upon, there is this bit of a cult of, you know, sort of deifying technology like it's going to be the answer to all of our problems. It's the most important thing, that we should be using it all the time, and if we are using it all the time, somehow that's a very good way to live our life, and constant connectivity. But it's a tool, and like any tool, we need to use it well. We need to know when to use it, for what, when to put it down. And I mean, you know, there's a lot of research around, for instance, addiction. Smartphones and addiction. Every time our phone vibrates in our pocket, every time we take it out and access it, every time we use any technology, we get a little hit of dopamine in the reward pathways in the brain, which are the same parts of the brain that get stimulated when we gamble and with the porn and take drugs, right? So we're literally becoming addicted to our devices. So to use it well, we need some awareness around it. We need to be very much aware of what we're doing. And I've been watching as we're going, and of course people are polling, so they have technology in their hands. And a lot of people have their head down a lot of the time, and perhaps they're really thinking deeply about the polling questions, or perhaps an email's popped up there and they're just kind of doing that, or a text message, and this is the world we live in. So to have that awareness as a mindfulness trainer, I mean, that's the fundamental thing that I want to give people, an awareness of what they're doing from moment to moment. You know, where's your attention from moment to moment? Are you following the conversation? Are you lost on your phone? And it's not good or bad. It's just something that we want to make a discerning choice around. And we need to have that awareness because of the addiction, and because it's becoming so pervasive and it's so celebrated. To have that awareness is super important. And there's also a lot of research that shows that the better people are at online communication, the worse they are at face-to-face communication. Because we just get better and better and better at deciphering the words and the information there, and we lose the ability to read non-verbal cues and to actually connect with people. So again, you know, we just want to have some awareness around it, to notice, you know, if we're with somebody and we're on our phone, perhaps that's detracting. Perhaps if we're taking notes as we're talking to a client, you know, that's getting in the way of the connection and the rapport. And we're missing some information that might be flashing across their face as they're saying one thing, but actually really sort of trying to tell us something else. So just bringing that awareness is super important. So, and of course, that can just begin with, you know, basic practices like just like bringing awareness to the way that we use technology. Flight moding our phone if we want to be productive is a really good idea. A study just found that if your phone is even on the desk, the detect that the performance starts to decrease on the task. You want to put it out of sight. I mean, simple things like that.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. We've started banning laptops from meetings, just in terms of some of the things that we do at our place in terms of working practice, because we find that people will just zone out and literally go onto their email. And if the conversation isn't headed their way, they think, okay, this is just not going to
Do
do
you
it.
find that you get through a 30-minute meeting in about 10 minutes?
Absolutely. Yeah. When you do it like that and you have people's attention, and it can really change things. So yeah, I agree with that. Okay, thank you everybody who polled as well. I know you guys can't see this. It is fascinating, and there are lots of words up there, that's for sure. One of the words that appears very prominently is blockchain. I can tell you I don't really think I understand blockchain. If there's anybody who does understand it, come grab me when we're having a glass of wine. I'd like to know more.
You should ask them if they either the same thing with the AI.
Yeah,
what does it actually mean?
That's true. Yeah, but AI is the other significant word up there. But certainly, I think there are some things that certainly are rapidly changing, impacting our space, and I would see these things certainly as part of that. So we'll move on to our final question of the evening, and again, I'm very happy for anybody with us in the audience here to contribute to these. We might go down, the panel might start with you on this, Anne-Marie. So just thinking about the strategies that could create the right environment to foster and support professional development and passions, within work and work-life balance for legal professionals. What do you think are the kind of things that we should be considering?
I think again it comes down to, especially in legal firms, again focusing on outcomes rather than billable hour. And also, I think firms probably focusing on the bigger picture, dealing with stress, and probably encouraging meditation, yoga, probably healthy eating patterns. So those are all things that companies can really get involved in and offer employees. And another thing I think that would really help is probably, a lot of companies do help with childcare, but also helping, young mothers with everyday tasks. It's thinking a little outside the box, but I think that's something that, young families would really appreciate, because that would really help the stress level and would really, create that culture of, they would probably feel, oh, someone's going to take care of that, so I'd feel better about doing, spending more time at work. So that again is just a balance, and companies just having that culture of facilitating that conversation and letting people know that they really need it, probably helping.
Thank you. Emma?
I think it's, again, I'll refer to what I said before, it's obviously not an easy fix because it's something we talk about all the time. I tend to think about it as what can we all do as individuals to make our lives better and our work lives better. I'm genuinely very passionate about people enjoying what they do for work, and I'm really happy to say that I 90% of the time like going to work. And so I think that it's really important for us all to do a job that we like most of the time. We're never going to like it all the time, but if you're doing something that you like most of the time, you're going to be happier, and that means that you don't mind when you have to work late, or you have to work on a weekend occasionally, or you make it work for you. And hearing Cade's story about her career, I feel like you changed it because you knew that wasn't working for you, and you turned it into something that is still using your good skills to do a job that you like doing and you feel is helping you and helping other people. So I think that that's a really good way to approach it. I did Google this because I didn't know what else to say, and I found something which I thought was brilliant. Because we all track our data these days, spend 1 week tracking what you do at work and what you do outside of work, and then do an audit of where you spend all your time and cut out the things that you actually don't enjoy doing. There's some things that we always have to do, But cut out the things, for example, one of the things I read was don't spend half an hour reading clickbait online. It doesn't help you, so don't do it. Cut it and do half an hour of yoga or something that you enjoy doing.
Did you call it clickbait?
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I've just learned that recently too.
Yeah, right,
but
okay. I knew exactly what you were talking about when you said it.
Takes you to a dark place.
Yes, it does. And Cade, what are your thoughts on this question?
I guess I thought of it, some answers to this question from the perspective of a manager. Having managed a few teams at Justice Connect, sometimes working on our tech projects, which can get really, they can have some real spikes of activity. I think to create an environment where you can foster and support development of personal passions, I always try really hard to think of the staff that I'm working with around me as people, and something that a little strategy that I use when I get to work, especially if I get to work and I've been on the tram and I've been going through my emails and I'm getting more and more stressed as I get into the office, and I'm thinking about all the things that I'm going to have to do when I get there, is I actually think, and I'm lucky that I love my colleagues and they're all wonderful and I count them as my friends, but still you get into that stressful working situation sometimes. I try to think of their morning, and I think of them leaving their house and what their morning was like, and lots of them have got little kids, and it just, for me, frames them as the person that they are with all their life and their likes and their dislikes and their personal passions. And it makes me remember that they're a human being with their context around them, so that when I go into work, I'm not just in like work mode, I'm still treating them like a person and they treat me like a person, and I try to create a nice environment in that way. It doesn't always work, but I try my best so that I'm not always just coming in the door in bright work mode, because I think that it creates a much nicer environment for everyone. And then of course you do go and get the work done anyway, but I just feel like lawyers have this tendency, they're competitive, they like to get things done, they're A-type personalities. You get a whole bunch of them working on a really stressful project and you can just get whipped up into this frenzy, which I think is really counterproductive to those aspirations that you were just asking about, fostering a pleasant environment in which people can develop their passions. So that's one of the strategies that I try to use.
Great, thanks. And Richard, finally to you, what are your thoughts?
Again, for me, it would just come back to the importance of meaning. And connectedness in our work. I mean, I often see the pointy end of things. I see a lot of people from the business world come to see me in my private practice, for instance, and one of the fundamental things that tends to be happening is a disconnection from any sense of meaning or values, or, why am I doing this? People just been on a treadmill, sometimes at the top of their game for years, decades, and objectively doing really well, but just deep inside feeling very kind of hollow and ultimately burning out. And so, my job's usually reconnecting them with that. And of course, in my work with any firm, I'm always trying to help people to stay connected to that in the first place and not lose that. So why are we doing things? And that human connection, of course, is so important. And just a recognition that mental health is the same as productivity. Often, any time I'm working with any business, the first thing I do is just talk about how mindfulness, sure, it helps to reduce stress and improve resilience and that kind of thing, but it improves the bottom line. Obviously, the happier we are, the more productive we are, as it's been said. We'll work those extra hours. We'll help a colleague who needs a little bit of extra help on something, and so that's very important too. I think the ROI is about 3 to 1 on investment in mental health. You see big boost in productivity, and so not seeing them as kind of opportunity costs or as kind of at odds, but actually as being the same thing. For the happy workforce is a productive workforce, and so anything that we can do to improve connectedness, happiness, get people in touch with their values and a sense of meaning, and structuring work so that they're not just doing the same repetitive task over and over again, but actually seeing them broader case and actually feeling like they're actually having an impact. Anything that we do in that area, of course, is going to benefit everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard. And again, I just have to share an anecdote on that. Our organisation talks about advancing the rule of law, and that's we feel that is the purpose that we bring to work every day, are they? And when times are tough, going to that reservoir can help sometimes. So I certainly, those comments that all the panel made resonate with me from that perspective. We have a few more minutes left in the session. That was our final kind of question for the panel from me. Does anybody have any questions for the panel? Something that was raised but not followed up on, or that they'd like to explore that we haven't touched on? Anybody have a question? We have a roving mic, just in case. Thanks.
Hi, I was just wondering if you'd considered whether lawyers' ethical obligations are at risk of not being complied with if lawyers start to use artificial intelligence to help them do their jobs. Are you reasonably and diligently going through documents if you've got a program that shoots out the answer?
I'm happy to start answering that one because I already have a few apps that produce documents. So it's something that we have considered extensively at Justice Connect. So we have 2 live web applications that produce an information product based on answers that people give to the application. So one of them helps charities and not-for-profits work out what an appropriate legal structure might be based on their characteristics, and one of them helps charities and not-for-profits work out whether they are eligible for income tax exemption. So they're based on the Neotologic framework, and Neotologic calls itself an artificial intelligence company. The definition of artificial intelligence and whether or not a logic mapping program is artificial intelligence or not is open to debate. But that product, there's certainly, we call it a bespoke information product, and it's covered in disclaimers and it says that what you have received out of this application is a compiled bespoke information product based on the answers that you've input into the application. I think that we've landed on the outcome that particular application doesn't give you legal advice, but I think that it is only a few steps away from giving legal advice. And so that type of logic tree-based AI, it's pretty clear what the inputs and outputs are. And so I think that from an ethical perspective, you can map what's happening in there. And I think I'm reasonably comfortable with that because you can see what the input is and what the output is. I was actually having a conversation today with my friend Brendan about that, the AI that becomes a bit more like soup in the middle, where it begins to build its own logic and create its own ways of working, where you can't actually see what it's done in the middle to produce the outcome. And that is where it begins to become murkier. And we're actually talking about this in the context of administrative law. If you start to use that kind of AI to make decisions in government, so that might be sentencing decisions, that might be planning law decisions, how are you actually going to review those decisions if you can't actually go back through and see what the inputs were and how that program made that decision, because it's just a soup in the middle. So the Neotologic style one, you can go back and you can trace the logic that was the inputs that went into that decision making, but this soupy AI you can't. And so I personally think that is a bit of an ethical minefield.
I'm hoping the others. I'm just following on from what Cade said. I'm just hoping that the new generation of law students are learning about this and they can solve those problems for us when it happens.
Oh, sorry, just for the back, do you mind repeating?
But I was just saying, isn't it any different to an individual trying to make a decision and then going back over, particularly with lawyers who aren't necessarily very clear on documenting their thought processes through their files.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to ascertain what their view was that made that decision.
But at least a person can be struck off.
Fair enough.
And I think that's an argument in favour of application-based decision making, where you can see the logic, because you can actually get a consistency of outcome. And sorry to come back to the access to justice point, but if you have people who would otherwise not access a lawyer and you can give them access to a web application like that, and they're actually getting a legal outcome there. They're getting guidance. It's a consistent guidance, and their alternative might be seeing a lawyer that's never practiced in that area. He's going to give them a fuzzy answer, whereas they're going to get a clear answer from a web application. But that's diverging slightly.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. I'm getting a 2-minute warning for us to say.
Thank you. Some of you may have seen the Deloitte study that came out from the UK last year that was suggesting the tipping point in terms of some of the people factor, particularly those elements of support services, legal secretaries, paralegals, might be only 3-4 years away from here in terms of starting to have a real major impact on the numbers of people actually being employed within the legal services sector. The impact on core legal roles, qualified legal roles in that traditional sense, Deloitte's suggesting is going to be less. But I think that's changing the face of the industry quite substantially. And I think it's also, we're starting to raise some quite interesting questions, are we not, with these new technologies in terms of how we're training people for the future, if more and more of the routine type of lower level tasks are going to be taken out of the equation. How are we going to deal with that? How are we going to manage the reshaping of the sector for the future, do you think?
I again put it back a little bit to something that we talk about a lot, that the lawyers of the future will know how to use technology to their benefit, and that will be, for some people, actually knowing how to code and knowing how to do the things that I'm assuming most of us here don't know. And so I think that that's one way that it will change, is that yes, those jobs will be less because they'll be taken over by systems or processes or whatever it is, but the people who are working will have different skill sets than what we're used to. And so I think that that's the way that it will change and move. And I, it's certainly something that we say all the time, and any person that I meet who's about to go to university or is going to university, I say learn how to code or learn how to use computers well, because that's what will stand you out in the next few years, I think.
I give exactly the same advice.
Excuse me, could I just comment?
Sure.
My name's Morgan Hassel. I've been in suburban practice since 1979. I think you have to deal with people. And as a lawyer, your job is to look after people. You don't need to learn computer code to look after people. You need to deal with people and practice dealing with people and solving their problems. And that's what you've all said. You get all your information and then you talk to the person. You haven't said anything new as far as I'm concerned today, and I'm sorry, but all this talk about computer systems, etc., I'd rather go with Richard. You just sit down and have a chat, and you solve people's problems. If they're nervous, make them feel good. Help them solve their problems, which is what interviewers said you do once you've got all the information from them. You're not prepared to spend the time with people to get the information that's important to them, and I think that's doesn't bode well for the future of the legal profession.
Well, I think, thank you for the comment. I think the panel certainly expressed the importance of people throughout and understanding their clients, understanding their colleagues, and I think this, the impact of technology in our space I think is absolutely apparent. But I completely agree with you, as I'm sure everybody in the panel would, that it doesn't in any way take away the importance of the people factor in our profession, and certainly understanding and getting a connection with your client is absolutely at the forefront of that. So I think we all agree with that, and I think that our discussion today absolutely supported that. I think the poll results supported that. I'd like to just take the opportunity to just thank each of the panellists, and if you don't mind, Richard, Cade, So that really wraps for now. So if you're